Hi everyone, today we're here with the Mental Health Ambassadors program, which is a student peer-to-peer mental health promotion program that focuses on mental health awareness, resiliency, and self-care. My name is Madeline Cook, and I'm a junior majoring in biomedical engineering with minors in chemistry and neuroengineering. And I joined the Mental Health Ambassadors because I believe it's important to learn about mental health for ourselves and to share this knowledge with others to start the process of breaking down stigma towards mental health.
Hi everyone, my name is Destiny Cravens. I'm a junior majoring in psychology and sociology, and I joined the Mental Health Ambassadors program because I have someone in my family who has a mental illness, so mental health promotion has always been an extreme passion of mine.
Hello everyone, my name is Sierra Samuel and I am a junior biology major, psychology minor, and I joined the Mental Health Ambassadors program for the opportunities for mental health promotion on this campus.
Today we have guest speaker Elizabeth Vander Kamp, who is a UAB Artist in Residence, specializing in storytelling. For this event, she'll be presenting on Stories for Strength. Please welcome Elizabeth.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction. Oh, thank you for the applause. That's lovely. Thank you. I love the emojis. That is so nice. So I'm so glad to be with you all. It's been quite some time since I've gotten to do this. And as was mentioned in the introduction, I am a storyteller, and I'm going to share a story with you today. And so I invite you to experience the story in the way that's the best for you. I personally like to doodle while I'm listening. So if you like to do something with your hands, please do that. If you like to close your eyes, if you like to watch me, whatever is best for you is the best way to experience a story. And I think I've shared this before, but I'd like to share a riddle that, of course, has no wrong answers. And I think given the topic today, you can probably guess the answer. The riddle is this: what is it that when you give it away, you keep it, that moves from place to place, changing as it moves, that without it, there is no reason or meaning, no past or future? And I'll just go ahead and say some of the answers I've heard to this question are love, a smile, a hug, kindness, trees, the present. And of course, all of those answers are right answers because they're all encapsulated in stories. So I really do believe that it's stories that make the world go round, and it's the stories that we choose to tell about ourselves and that we are drawn to that really help create the world around us. So our story today is called The Quilt Maker's Gift. Long, long ago, on the side of a mountain, there lived a quilt maker in a small cabin, and she spent her days sewing quilts. Now, these quilts were so beautiful, they just took people's breath away. The oranges and the violets were so vibrant that people thought maybe she knew of a secret wildflower area somewhere in the world. And the whites were so white that they were dazzling, and they thought somehow she sewed snow from Antarctica into her quilts. And the blues looked like they came from the highest sky and the deepest part of the ocean. Well, some people said her quilts were so beautiful that there's no way a human could have made them, that actually she was a witch, and that's how her quilts came to be so beautiful. And other people said, no, 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 she is not a witch. She's not exactly an angel, but she has some friends who are angels. And when they fly by her cabin, they drop quilts to her from heaven. And other people said she did indeed make the quilts that she learned from her grandmother. Well, the thing about these quilts was that they were for the poor and the lonely. And when the quilt maker finished one, she would walk down the mountain and find someone who was poor or lonely, wrap the quilt around them, tiptoe away, and then begin a new quilt the next day. Well, people, pockets bursting with gold, would climb the mountain because they knew about the quilt maker's gifts, and they would bribe her and they would beg her and they would plead with her, please, please, please make me a quilt. And she would say, I cannot, I only give them away to the poor and the lonely. Well, at the same time of the quilt maker, there lived a king. And this king, he was not a bad man, not at all. In fact, he had a very good heart. But like all of us with good hearts, that wasn't his only characteristic. He had grown up in splendor, and his parents were always looking for more things. And so he took on that habit and he began looking for more things. In fact, he wanted so many things that a law was passed that his birthday was to be celebrated every month on the 18th. And not only that, not only did he have 12 birthdays every year, he also demanded that everyone in the kingdom give him a gift on his birthday. And being a king, he did not accept gifts from the Dollar Tree. Oh no, not even Dollar General, not even Steinmart. No, no, no. Or Target. These gifts needed to be handmade or very expensive. So over the years, especially since he had 12 birthdays a year, the king came to own all kinds of trinkets and gadgets and beautiful clothes, handmade scarves and coats and shoes and all kinds of things. And he could be seen wandering about his palace, running his fingers over the trinkets and pulling a lever on a gadget and saying, someday I will find something that will make me happy. Well, the king had a very loyal soldier who was always on the lookout for this thing that would make the king happy. And he heard about the quilt maker and he thought, that's it, that's it. And he ran to the king and said, Your Majesty, there's a quilt maker who lives nearby and she makes the most magnificent quilts and maybe that will make you happy. But Your Majesty, you can't buy one. And the king was already running up the mountain to the quilt maker's house. Well, the soldier caught up with him, and the king, he wasn't raised with very good manners. So he didn't even knock on the quilt maker's door. He just barged in, and she was working on a star quilt. And he looked at it and he said, Give me that quilt. Well, the quilt maker was raised with good manners, and she said, I beg your pardon, who are you? And the king said, I'm a king, obviously. The crown should be a hint. And the quilt maker said, well, that's fine, but you didn't knock and you didn't ask, you just demanded, and no, I cannot give you this quilt. And the king said, but I want it. And she said, well, my quilts are for the poor and lonely, and I can easily see that you are neither one of those. And the king said, well, I still want it. And he tried to grab it from her hands. Well, the quilt maker took it and she threw it out the window, and the quilt flew away on a passing cloud. Well, no one had ever disobeyed the king. He was shocked. He was stunned, almost speechless. And he said, how dare you? And she said, if you want a quilt, give away all the things that you own and I will make you a quilt. And the king said, I can't do that. I don't give things away. I take things. She said, well, then I can't make you a quilt. So the king took the quilt maker down the mountain and he chained her to the cave of a sleeping bear. And he said, when the bear wakes up, he will make a very fine breakfast of you. Well, the king and the soldier left, and the quilt maker stood there chained to the cave. And indeed, the bear did wake up, and he got on his hind legs and raised his front claws and roared, rattled the quilt maker's bones. And she looked at him with kindness and said, I know why you're so angry. It's because you have nothing to lay your head on except cold, hard rocks. Go fetch some pine needles and I will fashion a pillow for you out of my apron. Well, the bear was so shocked that she said this that he fetched some pine needles and brought him back. He broke the quilt maker's iron bracelets, and she made him a pillow out of her apron. Well, the bear was so pleased, he sat down on the pillow right away, and he invited the quilt maker to share his breakfast of honey and blackberries. Well, they sat there discussing philosophy and hibernation and quilt making, while the poor king thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? I just left an old woman chained to the cave of a sleeping bear. And the king came running back. And when he saw that the quilt maker was having breakfast with the bear, he forgot about feeling sorry and he got mad all over again. And he looked at her and he said, I want a quilt. And she said, I would love to make you a quilt after you give all your things away. And again, he said, I don't give things away, I take things. She said, well, I'm sorry, but I can't make a quilt. Well, the king got so mad once again that he marched the quilt maker out to sea to a teeny tiny island. And in fact, this teeny tiny island was so small that she had to stand on her tiptoes. And she stood there and the king shouted from shore, when the tide comes in, you will be washed out to sea unless you give me a quilt. And she shook her head no, and the king laughed. Well, the quilt maker stood there watching the clouds bandy about in the sky. And soon there were lots and lots of clouds, dark ones, dark clouds full of thunder and lightning, and a little rain started to come down and wind was whipping up. And the quilt maker spotted a sparrow battling against the wind, flying, and she called to it. The sparrow battled the wind and flew over to the quilt maker, and she gathered the little bird in her hands close to her chest and breathed warm breath onto its feathers. And they stood there together and watched the clouds pass and the storm blow by. And then the quilt maker let the beautiful sparrow go. Well, the sparrow, of course, flew and told all her friends about the kindness of the quilt maker. And soon the sky grew dark with those little birds who flew to the island and lifted the quilt maker with their tiny beaks and flew her to their favorite tree, where she sat making cloaks for all of them. Well, the king, oh gosh, the poor king thought, oh my goodness, I have drowned an old woman. I have to go rescue her. So he came running back to the sea, but on his way, he passed the tree with all the happy birds and the quilt maker. And he looked up at her and he said, I give up. What must I do for you to make me a quilt? And she said, I told you, you have to give away all your things. And when you are poor, I will make you a quilt. And the king said, I can't do that. I don't give things away. I take things. And the quilt maker looked down at him from her perch in the tree. And she said, if these things don't make you happy, what good are they? And the king, of course, had to think about that and think about that and think about that. And finally he said, all right, I'll give all my things away. And he went back to the palace and he searched high and low for something he could bear to give away. And he finally came out with one little red button. And he gave it to a boy. Well, the boy had never had a red button, and he pinned it on his coat and he went and showed his friends. And that was enough to send the king back into his palace. And this time he came out with scarves, and it was a great day for that because it was cold. It was the first day that was cold that year. And the people put on the scarves and they were so proud of their scarves. They flipped them over their shoulders and they started a parade. And then the king brought out the velvet coats and then the horses on the real merry-go-round and all his trinkets and gadgets. And soon everybody in his land had something. But there was still more. So the king had wagon after wagon brought out, and he and his soldiers spent years traveling the earth, giving things away. And finally, when the king had nothing left, he came home. And all the while, the quilt maker had been working on his quilt. She had sold square after square of whites and blues and lavenders and heliotropes and all the colors. And she went looking for the king to give him his quilt. And she saw a man who had his toes poking out of his boots. He was kind of dirty. There were buttons missing from his jacket and holes poking out of it. But this man was laughing, and children were gathering around his laughter. And the quilt maker realized that was the king. She went to him and wrapped the quilt around his shoulders. And he said, "What's this?" "What's this?" she asked. "Oh my goodness, don't you remember all those years ago? I promised you a quilt. I promised you a quilt as soon as you were poor." And he said, "Me, poor? I might look poor, but I am not. In fact, I think my heart might burst open. I feel so rich with all the people I've met and all the stories I've heard and all the places I've seen. I am not poor." But the quilt maker said, "This is for you." So he accepted it gratefully, and a friendship was born on that very day. And thereafter, when the quilt maker finished a quilt, it was the king who took it and wrapped it around the person who was poor or lonely. And if they were lonely, he spent time with them and made sure that they knew they didn't need to be lonely again. And that's the story of the quilt maker's gift. And I have this horrible, sinking, terrible, bad feeling I've told this story before. And if I have, I'm going to beg forgiveness and ask you what you heard this time. Hi, Robin. Hi, Robin. So,
I don't remember this story before, but I really enjoyed it this time. I think you are like a beautiful storyteller. So every time you tell a story, it just feels great.
thank you, Sierra. I'm so glad. What was this story about to you?
To me, it was like a classic kind of person who is like in power and they don't realize that there's all these people around them that kind of need something, and like they haven't experienced that level of kindness before, and so they don't know what it feels like to give it to others. And so it was really interesting to hear how once he was able to give kindness to one person, like he craved the feeling of bringing joy to others and continually doing that. So,
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Thank you. What else? Did anybody else hear something else or other things to add?
Hi, Miss Elizabeth.
Hi, stars.
I think you are also an amazing storyteller. I do remember this story when I believe we made hearts at the hospital, at an activity at the hospital. And I just wanted to expand on the story and discuss how even though the king just wants this blanket, you realize that the surrounding people are looking at him from a different angle of privilege, and they would do almost anything to have what he currently has.
Yeah, thank you. So what do you want to pose a question to the group, or like just talk about maybe recognizing what we have, or what do you think?
I would like to say recognizing what we have is definitely important, because even though we feel like our life would be better with something, with another aspect, we also can't really imagine life without what we have now. It's just important to not take what we have for granted.
I agree. I have a little story about this. I have a very old phone, a 5S, I don't even know what you call them, but anyway, and my and I have thought for a while it'd be nice to have a new phone, just it would be nice. And my husband got me one this past week, and you know what? I don't care. I'm grateful to have a new phone. I'm grateful to have a new phone. And kind of like the king getting another trinket or, having another birthday is just like, I think I'd rather, I don't know. I was amazed that it didn't change my life instantly having a new phone. I'm kidding, but has anybody ever else had that experience, like thinking, like I've thought I want something so much and then I get it and it's just not that meaningful after all. And please don't leave me hanging out here alone.
That's
people.
happened to me before. Like the other day, or not the other day, this was like last year, I ordered a Taylor Swift blanket and I was really, really excited about it. And I thought it would like change my life for some reason, but I was just so excited about it. But like my life wasn't any different after that. And I think it just goes to show that we get so fixated on material things that we forget that life is still going on around us. And there are so many things you have right now that can make you happy.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you like your Taylor Swift blanket?
Oh, I love it so much.
Okay.
But it didn't like change my life. It didn't make it like any worse or any better or anything. Like it was like it's great, but it's just not like there are like things in this life. Like I could live without a Taylor Swift blanket for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It reminds me of like being like the word pride or proud, and how you can have such different meanings. Like being proud could be like very like a lot of like self-esteem, self-confidence, self things that really it's more about being, for me, thinking about being proud of other people and not self-centered, but trying to be selfless, and being more outwardly, thoughtful about others. And I got that from the story, is really this transformation of, the inward to the outward, and how I think during this time really of COVID and a lot of online learning for students and just all these different things that students are having to think about, as well as faculty and everybody else in this world, and really what matters. And like, we just had Thanksgiving and looking to the holidays and how we spend it. And I think it helps center us also on really what do we need and what do we want, and which are very different things, and how we can be thankful that we do have the things we need, and that, like it's fun that we get some things that we want, but that really that appreciation for what we do have and resting peacefully in that. Yeah. So that's kind of what I was getting from this. But it's always so beautiful to hear your stories. They're so peaceful to me and just centering.
I'm so glad.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Yes. Hi, Melanie.
Hi. I'm opting for the little figurine instead of how I really look today. But
Okay.
I loved your story. I was sitting here coloring during your story, and I felt so nurtured. And yeah, you're a wonderful storyteller. It put me in mind. Really kind of put me into the Advent Christmas sort of frame of mind. There's a beautiful it's a Christmas carol. It's called "In the Bleak Midwinter."
Oh, yeah.
And it just put me in mind of the verse about there are all these kings that have gifts, and they give the gold and the frankincense and the myrrh, all these tangible objects, the fancy things. And the shepherd boy says, "What can I give him, poor as I am?" Um, anyway, he said, "I'll give him my heart." And the woman who created the beautiful quilts, really, it was from the heart. And it just put me in mind of that. It's just a very beautiful story about giving, and sets the tone for this season. So thank you so much. It was just beautiful.
Thank you. I love that. I love that carol.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I just put something in the chat that I love of that the words, in the Christian faith, this is the time of Advent. And I think it's so funny that Advent is to prepare for a coming, and in Christianity is for the birth of Jesus. And that it's a time to be quiet, to be silent, to rest, to enjoy the long nights and the short days. And yet our society is like run around and get a lot of lights and buy presents and do all this stuff. And yet the words silent and listen are made of the same letters. And so I think that's no accident that I hope, just like you all did, like that we get to listen to our own hearts and the hearts of others and create a silence so we can hear our hearts and others all the time, but maybe especially now. Does anybody else have a thought they'd like to share?
I just had one thing that I was thinking of throughout the like listening to your beautiful story, and I love the way that you speak. It's so elegant. But one thing that I think, kind of like what Dr. Lindsay was saying throughout this semester, is we've had to kind of learn and adapt to different things, even from like the spring semester. And so like it's kind of a continuation of just learning. And throughout the story, the king really has to like learn time and time again that he's not going to get that blanket unless he kind of changes the way that he approaches like his whole life and being. And so it's kind of this huge shift for him. And I think we're kind of going through that as well. So it was nice to hear that and hear like a good end to the story.
Oh, thanks, Mackenzie. I agree. I like good endings. And I think, there can be lots of trouble on the way, but yeah, we have had to change a lot, I think. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Host ladies, is our time up?
I think our time is up today. Thank you so much for presenting. I absolutely loved your story. And again, we could not do this without the UAB Artists in Residence. So thank you for all that you guys do.
Thank you. It's so good to see you all and hear you all. Thank you.